Last night, for the first time, my parents met Guy's parents. They've chatted on Zoom, but it was the first in-person meeting. There we sat, two sets of grandparents, me and Guy, and the three kids. And it was brought home to me once again just how much potential there is in this world for creation, for unexpected relationships, for the embracing of joy. After having children, I didn't expect to meet anyone, not really. And the children didn't expect to get a second parent, let alone a whole new set of grandparents. But it happened. And of course, it's been something of a process. It's been an adjustment for everyone. After so many years of our family existing in a certain way, it has taken time. But the open-hearted way that everyone in the equation has come to view others as family has been really special. And last night, as we sat there, I was reminded again that this happens all the time in so many different ways. So many people come into our lives, unexpectedly often, and become nurturing presences in our life, not just our biological family. I know that I am not alone when I say that throughout my years, there have been others, teachers, mentors, peers even, who have done the work of caring for me, nurturing me, helping me grow. I assume this is true for everyone. Throughout our lives, our chosen family, we might call it, our family of the heart, can be just as valuable, if not more so, than our family by blood. Being open to the reality of that asks us to live with mind and heart ready to accept and offer love. It asks us to shed old notions of blood being thicker than water, or whatever phrase has been used to ensure loyalty at all costs. I believe that our growing and our nurturing never ends, and it takes a pod, as Ethan said, a team, a community, to best raise humans all throughout their lives. So this belief is why I was so struck by this concept of allo-mothering or other mothering that Alexis Pauline Gumbs writes about. She describes, in the case of the dolphins, a particular adoptive and fostering behavior. We know that in humans, not just marine mammals, the work of allo-mothering, or to use the broader term allo-parenting, is so vital. Now, this term was new to me when I read it in Gumbs' book and then in a New York Times article I will reference shortly, but it basically means mothering or parenting by someone other than the biological parent. That's like the basic meaning. And as humans, we have a pretty good understanding of the value of adoption and fostering, aware that they present challenges and involve both joy and pain, but knowing that they are vital for the protection of children at times. But allo-parenting actually means so much more than specifically adoptive and fostering behaviors. It's expansive, this term. It's not limited. It might mean grooming. This is in reference to mammals, other than humans usually. Grooming, carrying, nursing, teaching, raising, and so much more. So it is common among mammals, but apparently also happens with birds and insects, which is just very cool. Essentially, allo-parenting demonstrates collective responsibility for raising the next generation. It's action taken not because there's a particular material reward, a return on your investment. Rather, individuals and communities allo-parent because they understand that the work of parenting is fundamentally shared, that the work of survival and thriving takes all of us, and that raising the next generation well benefits all of us. My experience of being parented and now parenting is that we have leaned really hard into some myths of modern parenting. Among them, the idea that we can do it all alone, that parenting happens like in the home with your parents, and that it is uniquely the job of one or two folks labeled parent. In modern white American culture, we've lost a lot of our understanding of collective parenting. We've become isolated in certain ways, too individual in others, relying on and insisting on the primacy of the nuclear family. And the pandemic did nothing to help that situation. In a New York Times piece from October 2020, Jessica Groves writes about the particularly challenging time that was parenting in the deep parts of the pandemic, when families were even more isolated than in pre-pandemic times, spending all day doing caretaking and child raising fully within the home. The piece was written in response to the anger and frustration expressed in some pockets of the country about the lack of support for parenting during the pandemic, and/or anger and frustration about offering too much leniency to parents who were working from home at the time. So maybe some of you remember this tension. I don't know, I do. I don't know if anyone else does. Many of us stuck at home felt totally trapped, totally unsupported and overwhelmed, not to mention guilty all the time about everything. While many folks who didn't have children at home couldn't understand or didn't feel it was fair that our work and our time capacity shifted drastically during that time. It was like one more tricky layer to an already massively traumatic, difficult moment in our shared history. In this short time's reflection, Groves notes that the pandemic deepened the isolation that was already in place because of relatively recent changes in American culture. And this is the part that I really want to stress. She wrote in this piece, quote, "As far back as we can go in prehistory, parents engaged in what biological anthropologists refer to as cooperative breeding," said Robin G. Nelson, PhD, and associate professor of anthropology at Santa Clara University. "That's the idea that family and community members would help with holding, grooming, and sometimes even feeding your baby." Sarah B. Hurdy, an anthropologist, called these helpers alloparents, and her research suggests that shared childcare may have been the secret of human evolutionary success. Dr. Nelson called group living part of what it means to be human. So the point here is that for most of human history, communal living, multi-generational living, collective parenting has been the norm. And that the expectation was that it wasn't just family or blood relatives, but vast amounts of community members that were helping, because the future of the species was understood as everybody's work, whether you were biologically a parent or not. Groves goes on to note that the idea of one parent staying home and dedicating themselves to child rearing was a 1940s, 1950s creation in white America. And that in fact, when you, quote, "go back to the beginning of American history, the same facts hold. From colonial America through the early 20th century, there were almost no parents whose days were dedicated to just childcare without support." The stay-at-home parent is a relatively new invention, is the point. And yet this myth, born in the 40s and 50s in a segment of American culture, has had a really strong hold on us. Even now, when according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, 2/3 of two-parent households have both parents employed, there are still deeply embedded notions about who should parent and how, and who should feel guilty about working and needing help in child raising. We still have deeply embedded notions about who should or can participate in parenting, and we have deeply embedded notions about what parents can and reasonably should expect in terms of help and aid from others in the society. Now, Groves is clear that this was a shift toward the nuclear family and toward a sort of intense parenting that encouraged a degree of isolation and individualism, and a general desire to prove that no help was needed. And she notes that this shift happens in the idea of parenting as depicted on TV and in parenting books and in recommended care methodology, but it wasn't actually a change on the ground for many people in this country. A lot depended on race, culture, and circumstance. And yet the change impacted how we view those who need more help, those who create teams or pods of nurturers, those who continue to embrace a concept of alloparenting. Now, I've thought a lot about this, the isolation of parenting and the judgment that parents face. It's hard not to consider these as someone who chose to bring children into the world as a single parent. Ultimately, if I'm honest, all of my thinking about it has just made me super aggravated about that shift 70 years ago. And it's reminded me just how silly and foolish it was all along. Because Ethan was not wrong. Like, I was indeed a single parent with the ultimate responsibility for 3 young lives resting on me, but the notion that I was alone, or should have been alone, is flawed. Friends, family, all helped in their different ways, alloparenting by holding the kids, taking them for walks, nurturing them in different ways. The truth is that actually single moms are pretty notorious for understanding that you really can't do it alone. It's just not possible. That in fact, the cultivation of a community of alloparents is vital, right? Single mothers are good at creating a network of care from among family and in the larger community. born of necessity, in truth, but it's the result of the inescapable truth that it isn't possible for one person to do all of it. It just isn't. Collective parenting has always been and will always be human nature. And I'm gonna say something like real bold. I think allo-parenting is actually what's gonna save all of us. I'm putting it out there. We'll see what happens. Okay, great. We'll see what happens. Because I believe that we're clinging to this myth of the nuclear family that's actually just been destructive and dangerous. Okay, so here's what I think about this. When we view parenting as an insular or limited act, we deepen the individualism that separates us, forgetting that we have shared experiences that allow us to connect to each other. When we view parenting as an insular or limited act, we deprive our children of a diversity of experience and influence, partly out of fear, but we know that broad exposure to ideas and other ways of living is important for their development. When we view parenting as insular or limited, we lose our capacity to see all children as our children. We start to view ours as ours and yours as yours, and we abdicate responsibility. When we view parenting as an insular or limited act, we stop seeing caretaking and nurturing as a lifelong need that we all share and a gift that we all have to give, from birth to death. When we view parenting as an insular or limited act, we raise children to think their world is small, that their circle of concern and care and nurturing is small. So I think we have to stop being insular and limited and instead embrace an expansive idea of our interdependence, including when it comes to raising children in our families and in our communities. We all have the capacity to be nurtured and be nurturers all throughout our lives. And if we can rise to that challenge, we'll be all the better for it. But it will require us to let go of some of the fear, some of the guilt, some of the blame, some of that scarcity mentality that encourages us to hold our gifts close and dispense them frugally. Now, if I'm really honest this morning, it's that kind of morning, I've never loved preaching on Mother's Day. I try to avoid it. Because, I'll tell you why, because the day feels limited to me. It feels sort of like too closed up. I appreciate the desire among those of us with wonderful mothers, I had one myself, I have her still, to honor them. But so many have had challenging mothers, and so many of us have had wonderful nurturing from people who weren't our mothers or who don't identify as women, or on and on. So I kind of wish we had no Mother's Day and no Father's Day and just a day to honor and remember those who helped us flourish and become, no matter their gender or their official role in our lives. Okay. I want Allo Parents Day. How about that? It doesn't roll off the tongue. I want a world where all the communities are embracing, all of us are embracing the idea of collective responsibility and offering gratitude for those who embrace that responsibility as well. The responsibility for nurturing not only the young, but all of us in our lifelong becoming. Julia Ward Howe, who was a Unitarian, asked us to see all children as our children, to be sensitive to the needs and love of others, to understand all humanity as ours to protect. That call to peace and compassion and seeing the world as ours is no less vital today than it was in the 1870s in the wake of the Civil War. We may not be engaged in a technical civil war at this moment, but we do live through trying times that are testing our collective nurturing. Every week, we know acts of violence, mass shootings, hate crimes, crimes against the neurodivergent, and so much more flood the news. Each week, we are confronted at home and in the world with a shared humanity that doesn't understand itself as responsible for our shared humanity, right? The question is, how do we come to a place where we do see the tender heart of the other? How do we live out Julia Ward Howe's conviction that all humanity is ours to protect through the cultivation of peace, compassion, values, and empathy? How do we recapture the not so ancient wisdom that it takes all of us, an entire community, to nurture and care for each other? How do we remember that we're not alone? We need each other. Now, my answer is going to be extremely circular, and for that I apologize. But I think we do it, in a sense, by just starting in whatever way we can in the communities we are in. We begin right now to act from our shared belief in our interdependence and in the capacity of every person to offer compassion and cultivate peace. We start by stopping judgment, stopping blame, stopping keeping score, stopping approaching each other closed off. And we start by coming towards each other and the act of parenting and nurturing with grace, open-heartedness, fullness. And we take the lessons we learn in small communities like this and we bring them out into the world. Today we had the special joy of the children participating at the beginning of the service. And we learned that they've been talking about how to lead, how to be responsible, how to learn and teach and listen and care. Lessons we all keep learning. The very act of our embracing and empowering their leadership, their exploration, is a kind of collective allo-parenting. The listening we do when our young people, or any of our people, share their ideas and stories and memories with us, that is a form of nurturing. When we give space to others to become without judgment and blame and pressure, that is nurturing. Acts great and small. We work to create a corner of the world for our children and for all of us that is full of love, acceptance, and the space to become and explore their own identity and experience. We strive to be a team of nurturers, learning again and again how best to care for one another. So on this Mother's Day, or if you'll allow me, this Parenting and Allo-Parenting Day, we recommit ourselves to building a world that nurtures all children, all people. We commit ourselves to embracing the work of caretaking wholeheartedly, whether we are biologically parenting or not. We commit ourselves to deepening our own empathy and understanding and then living as examples of that in the world. We commit ourselves to taking on the mantle of leadership with open hearts, believing deeply in the value of each and every one of us. We commit ourselves to seeing the potential in this world, coming open-heartedly toward each other as we team up to do the work of nurturing, so that together we can change and heal the world. May we broaden again and again our understanding of caretaking, of parenting, and of nurture, never forgetting that we are a pod and we are not alone. So may it be.